second?
Second,
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. And can someone tell me who is online? Is Brownie the only voting member on?
I'm online just to present.
Okay.
So that you might be seeing.
I think that's right.
There's no other,
We are.
okay. Hey. Okay, so we definitely have a quorum, which I should have thought of before. Item number 2, just gonna say a statement here regarding, relationships with people's employers and that sort of thing. In accordance with the bylaws adopted by the Environmental and Energy Stewardship Subcommittee, subcommittee members shall not vote on any matter where the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on the member or any matter involving a person with whom the member has a close familial, business, or other associational relationship. Is there any item of business on the agenda today for which any member of this subcommittee is requesting recusal? Legal's not here, but I think they want me to say that every time and say that in the beginning as opposed to awkwardly during an item. So I'm glad that's in italics, makes it feel even stranger than it probably sounded. Public comment. Are there any folks in the room or online wishing to arrive? Okay. Moving on, there's definitely some, I think, meaty items under strategic plan goals here, so I want to get to those and then get through each of them. So we'll move quickly to the water quality monitoring update from Anne-Marie.
Thanks. I'm Anne-Marie Taylor. I'm the director of the Environmental Quality Institute, and we're just a small nonprofit lab. We have been operating this stream monitoring program since 1990 in Western North Carolina, and so I'm going to talk about this one, the Volunteer Water Information Network, today. And so, like I said, this program's been going on since 1990, and we have about 200 sites in Western North Carolina that are sampled every month in about 15 different counties right now. And so we have volunteers who are trained to go out and collect the samples throughout the region, and then the samples are brought back to our lab in Black Mountain every month. Like every week, we get a certain subset of samples, and we test them using we're state certified for the testing in our laboratory. So it's kind of a combination of community science for kind of collection, and then we in the lab do the analysis ourselves. And so this kind of region-wide program gives us an opportunity to kind of at low cost monitor the and be able to compare sites across the region pretty well. And so you can go to the next. Maybe could we turn the lights with that? It looks really hard to see to me, although I'm getting older, so.
Me too.
So every month, for all these sites, we in the lab, we test them for sediment measures like turbidity, which is water clarity, and total suspended solids, which is the weight of the sediment in the water sample. We test for nutrients like orthophosphate, ammonia, and nitrates, and then a few other parameters like pH, alkalinity, and conductivity. And then kind of on request, we test for fecal coliform, and then also total phosphorus for like lakes and ponds. So you can go on to the next one. So this is kind of a map. It's not the best. I might just kind of stand up so I can do it because I'm kind of hyper when I'm talking. So this is a map of our kind of regional equivalents. We have like 7 different river basins that we sample in. And so this is Asheville here, where a lot of it is taking place. And so, kind of with this widespread program, we have, kind of a mix of like urban, rural, and main stem rivers and a lot of different tributaries to them. And so we also take this data and calculate site ratings, water quality ratings from excellent to poor for all these sites every year. And so you can go to the next slide. So this is Buncombe County. I hope you can see okay.
Yeah.
So these are our water quality ratings so we use 3 years of data to calculate these water quality ratings, because if you only did 1 year, it's 12 samples, and you're not going to get the variation in seasons and rainfall and things. So like 36 samples over 3 years is what we use to make these ratings. And so, kind of the darker blue is excellent and good, and then kind of yellow is average, and orange to red is poor. And so this is kind of what it is across the counties. And so I just kind of wanted to break it down because that's a lot to kind of see. So if you turn to the next one. So this is where we are finding the good and excellent sites. So you're going to see kind of like the Ivy River watershed in Buncombe County. And then the Swannanoa River watershed we find for things like nutrients and sediment is pretty reasonable, pretty good in comparison. And then, some like Dingle Creek and Bent Creek in South Asheville. These are kind of where we're finding, places that are supporting a lot of wildlife and pretty good recreation opportunities, and, are kind of resistant to like these big heavy rainfalls we're getting, and kind of like the day-to-day rainfall. Like really the variation we see has so much to do with rainfall, obviously. And so, these areas are kind of resilient to those patterns. So next. So this is where we're seeing kind of the average water quality ratings for sediment, nutrients, conductivity, things like that. So a lot of the urban Asheville sites are falling in here, kind of some to the south, some to the north, but kind of in this column. And this is going to be like, we're going to see things like stormwater runoff off of impervious surfaces in the urban areas and problems like that that are different than kind of the more outlying areas. So next.
So average for the urban areas seems, I don't know, kind of not bad.
Kind of average,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
It is, so this is kind of a big picture talk. So I will say, if anybody has any like specific questions about specific areas, I'm happy to like connect with those people and like, give you a map, give you a graph of like whatever the thing is that you want to know. So this is just kind of like a bird's eye picture. So then going to the next slide is where we find the poor and below average sites. So this tends to be, again, still some in the urban Asheville. And then also we tend to see up in the northwest part of the county, like Leicester, Sandy Mush, the Turkey Creek areas, and like up in like, I know we're out of the county now, but like the Ivy River watershed in Madison County, right? So like Little Ivy coming down and then into the main center of the Big Ivy. So this is kind of, so if you just, again, could you go back to, so good, and then next is average, and then to the poor and average. So these streams get, really impacted by even kind of daily stressors, moderate rainfalls that we get, and kind of the problems linger. So if you go to the next slide. So this, I hope you can see, this is just looking at the site scores for nutrients. So phosphorus, nitrogen, ammonia, we're getting kind of like, so dark is the highest, the worst, let me rephrase this. The most nutrients we were seeing, like the worst scores for the nutrients, we're seeing still kind of in this, northwestern part of the county, and then, some in the urban areas. So next slide. The problem with this is that it can cause like downstream eutrophication. So, not nitrogen and phosphorus is normal in a stream environment, but excess levels can cause algae blooms, excess plant growth, especially in any like reservoirs downstream from that. And so these things come, we see them coming from like I just have a picture of this because you can see it, but a lot of times it's also, in addition to things like livestock waste coming off the land, it's also underground infrastructure like septic systems and sewer leaks. And so this is just kind of example of what we can see with the data, which is like, so this is the Big Ivy River watershed in Buncombe County, the Little Ivy River watershed in Madison County, and the lower Big Ivy. And then this is the percent of samples in this time frame that were greater than 0.15 milligrams per liter, which is a recommended level to stay below for downstream eutrophication. So, we can pretty clearly see like less than probably 10% of the times it's above that level in the big ivy, but then you get to the little ivy and about 50% of the times in some of these sites, it's excess. This is a little map. Oh,
Sorry, Jennifer, can you make this any bigger at all?
Okay, so, and to see the chart,
Yeah,
this,
I guess maybe just each
or-
element as she goes through it.
yeah, that's probably helpful for this. So I know that Jennifer was saying that y'all have already heard about the Swananoa River having high E. coli and fecal coliform counts lately, and so we've been involved in some of that too. The Swananoa Watershed Action Network have been working with DEQ for the swim guide analysis, and they were finding the highest levels upstream in Black Mountain, and that didn't make any sense. So we went and sampled upstream a few different times, and I think that, so this is Flat Creek, that up there is Montreat, and then coming down into the Swananoa River, where it meets coming out of Ridgecrest. This little side branch here seems to be the biggest source of the problem. And I thought it was kind of okay, here is the problem. But then when I sampled further upstream, it's still a problem up there at Montreat Road. So there's so many people involved in this right now. It's really interesting. This has been affecting the community garden at Veterans Park because they were using the river water to irrigate. And then Bounty and Soul, who takes some of that produce and distributes it to the community, was saying, well, if you're doing it with river water, we're not taking it. It's also this downstream at the Veterans Park is also a snorkel trail site. So potentially you have kids putting their heads underwater. And so this is really important to this community to fix. And there are a lot of ways it's being attacked right now, but as of this past week, I've not heard of any solutions. And the MSD has come out at least 3 times that I know of. And as far as I have heard, they have not found that the sewer system to be a problem, but something is causing this in this very small stream. So we're still kind of working on this problem.
You're saying we don't know the source of fecal coliform in urban Black Mountain?
In this specific little tributary that comes in, so there's a greenway right here, and so it's kind of high here. Right there's a little spring. It's called Spring Street where we sampled, that is very low, and it's 30 compared to 4,000 and 4,000 or 5,000 here. So there's it's high here where it crosses Montreat Road, and then there's a little spring that puts spring water into it. So it looks like it's not as much of a problem there, and then it's high again down here. So I think it's 2 problems. Starting upstream and figuring out that one, I feel is going to be really important, and then seeing if it's still a problem after that repair is done. So we'll see. It's TBD. We'll see what's happening.
It's probably not livestock, and it's probably
there's almost no livestock up in that area.
there's no septic in that area or low amount.
There's septic further, outside of Montreat.
So my understanding is, Anne Phillip with the town of Black Mountain has been in contact with the health department. As far as I've heard, I don't think that there are any kind of permitted systems since the 70s, but then there might be some up there that were prior to that system that are just nobody knows.
And we were looking into are there any package plants? Are there any, we've been driving around trying to find it. We heard that there was a sewer leak. So we're trying to get to the bottom of it, but we've, extension, soil and water, we've all been kind of all hands on deck up there trying to figure out what's going on.
Because the levels are so high that it's this is a public health concern.
Yes.
Yes, and it's crazy, right? These levels, and you saw
should
in
be
Dee
simple.
Dee's map, or Dee Dee's chart that she brought us, those numbers were,
And it's such a confined area. We should collectively be able to figure this out. So I'm hoping.
Tributary ends where it's shown on the map, I assume, right?
So it crosses. I can't remember.
Up here.
Whatever. It crosses over, goes up by Lake Avenue, and there's some development up there and stuff. And I'm not saying it's so I've had a colleague that's a consultant that went out and looked at the visible, I am not the infrastructure person, I'm the lab person, but she was, gave some opinions about what might be happening to DEQ in the town. And so it's just, honestly, in 20 years of doing water quality work in this area, this is by far the most people I've had looking at a problem and trying to fix it. So I will say one thing about this, which is that, as a county government, like what can you do? Like I see, and I kind of like, you saw the county-wide, where it's good, where it's poor. I think that what you guys are doing to conserve land is really important in terms of preserving water quality and improving water quality in the county, right? Like super important to like keep problems from happening before they happen. Another one I feel like that's like Soil and Water does a great job with is like having technical support and some amount of funding for landowners to manage their property well. And I feel like that's like such an important thing. Like I had a friend in Black Mountain, not in this sub-watershed, but had a feeling, and it was gonna be like $6,000 to $7,000 to repair a septic system and $10,000 to connect to MSD. And so like, that's not a small cost for people. So even when we find the problem, like how long will it take to repair? Will someone have to take out a loan for that? Like I have concerns. Just once we even find it, it's not gonna be like, okay, done. Unless it's MSD and they're great about fixing problems when they find them. So, anybody have any questions?
Fecal lasts in the soil column for a while, so even when we clean it up, even if we stop the leak, we won't immediately see.
I will also add that these samples that we were taking that are in the thousands, this was when we were having drought conditions for like weeks and weeks we didn't have rain. So this is not pet waste washing into the creek or anything like that. This is like in the water, not from overland.
How quickly does it dilute out as you go down the stream?
So that's a really good question. Let's see, let's see. I think by down here where Flat Creek was coming into the, so there's like, it comes from like Ridgecrest and then Flat Creek, and that's where like kind of Swannanoa really starts to be Swannanoa. And so there it was about 2,000. We do CFU, colony forming units per 100 milliliters is our units. So it was about 1,900 there. Up here it was like 4,000, 4,500, 30, 3,600, sorry. So thousands, still a couple thousands by the time it like really becomes the Swannanoa. And it was maybe like from what Swan was finding, I think it was still like a couple thousand, over 1,000 in like at the Riverwalk Park, behind Bilo, and then goes into Veterans Park, and I can't remember what it was at Veterans Park. It gets lower, it gets diluted by other little tributaries. I really didn't think this was necessarily gonna be the problem, but it turns out it is.
So I walked away with the impression from the public comment last time that this was a whole Swannanoa River watershed issue, and you're saying it's not, it's really specific issue.
I think that there is a really specific issue making it all a lot worse. So we look at these kind of landscapes, and a lot of this is non-point source pollution, which means it's a little from there, a little from there. You go out when it rains, and it's like there's mud coming along the street, there's mud coming along the street. And it's just like whack-a-mole, like what can we possibly fix? It adds up together. This, I think, is a very specific findable problem that could be fixed and that will dramatically reduce the fecal coliform in the Swannanoa River in Black Mountain. By the time you get to Asheville, it's a much bigger watershed with a lot more problems.
And in this one where we see pretty high quality water is not fecal, this is not monitoring for fecal.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see on a 3-year average, the Swannanoa is fairly healthy. And we don't have any areas of concern over a 3-year average in Swannanoa. So we do know that, again though, not regularly monitoring for fecal.
Right.
So that's something
These ratings are also
no, go ahead.
These ratings are also through like using the data from 2021 to 2023, we sampled this March at the community center on their request, and it was low, like below 100 for fecal coliform. So I'm wondering if the problem has happened since spring. And it just collectively, we all noticed it soon after it happened.
Have we shared with this group the septic repair, septic
Mhm.
permitting data before? So y'all have seen that. We can see where complaints are occurring, failures. It'd be interesting to overlay it on something like this. Because we have that information.
That'd be great.
My only question is, it'd be great, do we have an update on this, like keep us posted type of thing? don't know.
I can be in touch with Jennifer about it and she can share.
And I know you're gonna find it and it'll be a victory lap, we'll all be excited, and it'd be nice to just hear the progress.
Yeah, at this point, I'm kind of done sampling, like until somebody wants to do something about it. Like, I'm not gonna be the one going trampling through people's yards trying to find a really specific house this might be coming from. Like, that's not my role. So if anybody wants me to continue doing extra sampling, I'm happy to do that. And I would actually live on that side of the county, so like I can even go get the samples, it's fine.
Do you have any recommendation for the northwest part of the county? It seems like that's agricultural.
Yeah, so this is talking about, this is, so it's brown for sediment.
The nitrogen.
Again, kind of what I was saying is like, I feel like you guys are going the right direction in what I've seen about preserving land and lending assistance to landowners. Like, I feel like that's a big deal. And because, you know, you might have a creek that goes through your property that has cattle accessing it, but you don't necessarily have thousands of dollars to fence them out, you know, or you don't have the equipment to make that an easy job. And so I feel like what Soil and Water does is really important. Like, their role is really important. I don't have, like, I'm not the person that knows how to fix all the problems. I'm like the person who points out the problems, so I apologize. But so if you go a couple slides ahead, so this just kind of drills that whole point. Go one more slide, yeah. Go back one. So like, part of this is the problem where you have like just a century or more of deforestation and land clearing, logging, like, so we have all these like historic problems plus new problems like loss of working lands and, you know, the potential that could be a problem from new developments. Not that, you know, like, obviously on a case-by-case basis, you know, a lot can be done right also. But, you know, like I was just recently reading our Southern Highlanders by Horace Kephart, and he talks about like farming happening on like 45-degree slopes. And, you know, a lady farmer who he met, who talked about having to prop up hills of corn with a rock so they didn't fall downhill. So we just have like this legacy of problems in agricultural areas specifically, you know, kind of these valleys that are close to the rivers. And then also these kind of steeper areas that have just been historically used as needed, you know.
And is it fair to say, thinking back to that map with the red dots of poor
Yeah.
quality, is it mostly sediment or entirely sediment?
It
or
is sediment and nutrients. That is, I mean, it's both.
Okay.
Yeah. So part of, you know, you mentioned, and like, please stop me if I'm like talking too much. You know, you talked a little about, you asked about the average and in kind of the urban areas. Like, really, we don't see a ton of sediment in the urban areas. We see other things like some nutrients, but also like high conductivity. And I've got a slide on this too. If you want to go back like a couple slides, I'll just get through the sediment stuff really quickly because it's the same kind of story. So like, this is a map of where the high levels of sediment are. And it's similar to the poor sites, you know. So like, this is the French Broad River, you know, some of these are the French Broad River itself, but then kind of like up there is where we find a lot of the sediment. I mean, it just is, even like when it has been not rainy lately, like it just is on the stream bed. And it, even just kind of normal levels of stream flow really just kind of keep it generally suspended.
And this makes sense because in urban areas, we have pavement, right?
Yes.
And less opportunity for sediments. So it makes sense in our more open landscape that we have an opportunity for sediment loading.
So the next slide, so this is just another way of looking at the sediment. So turbidity actually has regulatory limits, and so it's 10 NTU for trout waters, which granted a lot of these aren't trout waters, but and then it's 50 NTU for all aquatic life. And then this is the water clarity. And so this is kind of South Buncombe, Swananoa River watershed, urban Asheville, like less than 10% of the time, a lot of these, it's not, turbidity is not like a huge problem. So this is, the dark brown is the amount of percent of samples in this 3-year period that are above 50 NTU for aquatic life. And then the lighter brown is above the percent of time it's above 10 NTU, which is the trout water standard, which is pretty strict. So this is, just want to know, like some of the better sites, and then go to the next slide. So this is like the French Broad River and the Northwest County, and then like the Little Ivy in Madison County. This is where we see like just a lot of the times it's turbid. Even like this isn't just, being above these levels like 40 or 50% of the time, like we're not sampling during rainfall 40% of the time. Like this is just kind of a consistent thing that's happening in those areas. So next slide. So I kind of talked about this. We have like, this is the Hominy River or Hominy Creek near Asheville. It's, chocolate milk, right? And then we have stormwater runoff. This is actually like Black Creek and Black Mountain. This is not the fecal coliform problem, but this is a separate problem where you have like just kind of bare land that people park on every day to like wait and get their kids at the primary school. And then when it rains, it just washes straight to the right into Black Creek. This is kind of a picture of this is Hall Creek in Asheville. It just kind of constantly murky regardless of the water, like rainfall. It just, it could be from infrastructure or just kind of a constant level of suspension.
Yeah, there's natural turbidity in streams. Streams are moving, they're churning up water. And then there's increased turbidity when storms are happening and we have velocity adding to, which is churning up either the stream bed or bringing in sediments. I think it's really important to think about and understand that always murky, there are streams that the natural turbidity in them is always present.
Before we continue, so we have this item scheduled for 10 minutes, we're gonna stop the fun, it's 10:30.
Yeah.
So,
I heard 15 to 20. Let's be fair.
so whatever y'all like to do, but.
This is the last slide.
I guess in conclusion, is there,
Yeah.
Thoughts you have on further testing? Do you think testing overall is robust and adequate? And then do you have any other
Yeah.
recommendations on?
So the way we work is like mostly this program is monthly and it's a certain kind of like sponsor fee for the lab analyses. And so, the county's been great, like over many years of helping pay for the county's kind of outlying areas, issues. City of Asheville also helps and MSD actually also pays for a lot of sites as well. And so I think that honestly, like we have kind of the most coverage in Buncombe County of all the counties that we monitor in. We have the opportunity, like we're just a small little lab. So like if it's like a storm is coming, we want to take multiple samples and bring them in to see what the turbidity is or see what the fecal coliform is, or it's been really dry, let's sample multiple places. We can do that kind of like little side project in addition to the monthly sampling to kind of see like what are the effects of stormwater or what are the effects of drought, or we're looking for a specific source of something.
Is there fecal coliform testing that exists to identify whether it's pet, human, what other?
Yeah, you can do like eDNA sampling. It's not something we can do. I think there's a place in Knoxville that some of our colleagues send samples to. It's a few $200 per sample, as far as I know. But if you have like a specific, reason, a specific site that you want to know about, like sending a sample off, like to that would be a reasonable idea. Some it's pretty, like I really don't think it's anything but human in the SWAT in the Flat Creek area issue. But if you had a reason to be like, well, I don't know if it's from this or that, then absolutely that's a possibility.
Thank you, Ann. Is there any other questions for Ann?
Thank you guys, sorry.
Thank you.
Coming
No
in
apologies.
late.
Thank Moving on, let's continue with Jennifer. That simpler note.
Alrighty.
Preventing erosion before it is the thing, right?
That's right. Okay. Okay, so as you recall, we did the work a couple years ago to set the conservation goal. And so what we wanted to do today was revisit that in terms of the strategic plan. I have Ariel and Uvney here with me today. They do our farmland protection program, and they're managing all of our conservation easements. And so they're here to help answer any questions. But what I first wanted to do was kind of walk you through a little bit of the history really quickly on what does conservation look like in Buncombe County. So our program started around 2004, and you can see that the county-held easements are in the orange, and we only had a very, very, very few easements. So that's, and then we had public lands, we had some of our land trust partners working in the area. Then in 2013, you can see that we've gotten, the game lands came in, we've gotten a lot more easements happening up in the Sandy Mush area, both county and land trust partners. In 2019, this is now just switching just to public-private instead of breaking out all the different land trusts. But you can see we've definitely expanded in Sandy Mush. We've gotten a lot more moving this way in the Swannanoa. And then in 2023 is when we established the conservation focus areas, and those are the, what looks like purple up there, to help us guide where we strategically look for easements. And you can see that definitely over time we're getting a lot more down here in Fairview, in our Candler and Hominy Valley area. And then, so this is 2023. Now I want to show you 2024, which just in 1 year, this is the impact of the bond and the support from the commissioners and our goal. Just like, if we just keep going back and forth, look at Leicester, just look at up in the, up here, as I go from 2023 to 2024. That's incredible. And if you look down in the Candler Hominy, this is, Pisgah View coming on, which was a huge help, but significant there. We are also seeing in Fairview, as I just toggle a little bit, not quite as much, and then we are also seeing improvement in Barnardsville. Oops, went the wrong way. So it's time to move on. Okay, so you can see that in the span of about 19 years. We have, the program has initiated the conservation of almost 11,500 acres in the county at an expense of about $11 million county dollars. So that doesn't include any grant funds that we bring in or any of the money that our land trust partners also raise to help get these projects complete. Now, that's, so 11,500, but we've only closed 9,000 acres essentially. So that means fully done. And for that, that cost about $9 million of county dollars. So that leaves us with about 2,500 acres in which we're working. So if you think about that number, that's incredible. We've got 2,500 acres in the pipeline, which means in the last couple of years we're bringing in this level, and that's at about a $3 million cost to the county. And in that 3 million includes about 400,000 from bonds. And the important point I want to make here is how important the bond funding as well as the commissioner funding is to reaching this goal. So if we do all the math, that's 637 acres per year on average that we are getting into the pipeline. So when we started the goal setting, we looked at it, 420,480 acres, 20% is, 84,000 acres, and we needed 1.3%. So we felt good about the initiation of 20% of Buncombe County being conserved by 2030. Well, the good news is we're almost there on that initiate, not closed, but initiate. And so the discussion is where do we go next? So when we were having the conversation about percentage, every 1% is over 4,000 acres. Remember, we've only done 11,500, in 19 years. So that's a tall ask. And with every easement that we close, there's less land out there available. So the conversation at the retreat was, let's talk about it instead of percentage in acres. So what do we think is reasonable? Well, historically, we've done 637 acres. We want to stretch, we want to continue to work. We also know the pressure of every easement we close is less acreage out there. So the recommendation from staff is, why don't we set it at about 700 acres? That would get us an additional 3,500 initiated, and that will take our goal to 87,595 acres if we met the initiation. So that's kind of the number side of the discussion. What do you think?
Go back to the last. That one more.
Just to provide the process context for you all, at the retreat on August 22nd, the board said, hey, we like this goal, let's refine the target. And then coming out of this conversation, we'll go back to the Board of Commissioners on October 15th for the next touch point with the recommendation from the Environmental and Energy Stewardship Committee.
Could you go back to the slide with the 2024 map?
And so the average for the 637 per year, you were using the average back from 2004 or 2005 to get that?
Yeah, that's our.
So what have we averaged per year, say in the past 10 years? 4 or 5 years? I mean, something more recent, because there wasn't a lot done. So like that's really kind of diluting it going all the way back to 2004.
We've been tracking for the current strategic plan goal for the past, 4.5 years. Our target has been 730 acres for the past 5 years. So that's where we've been tracking so far.
735.
730.
730. Okay, so you're pretty close.
So we
to
also
that.
kind of looked at that at the same, and with the other understanding of a lot of the large tracts of land are already protected or they're being scooped up for development. So, so we are seeing that our parcel sizes for easement projects are tending to be a little smaller than they have been in the past. So, yeah, factor that in.
So,
And a big help to get us to the 20% Pisgah View, that's 1,500 acres right there. Warren Wilson, another 600 acres, we got Lake Eden Preserve at 350. So we had a couple of really big projects. When we were kind of working through the numbers, we reached out to our land trust partners as well and said, what do you got on the horizon? Do you have anything out there? And they didn't report anything of significant acres such as those projects. So, so in that 730, those big projects are factored in to get us to that number.
And so with this number, because we as the county didn't actually put any funding into Pisgah View State Park.
Correct.
But so like, if we're talking about this current goal here, 700, we're talking about where the county actually will. That 700 won't be a project that we don't have anything to do with. Those will only be projects where we are actually helping with transaction costs or doing something toward it. Because, yeah, Pisgah View, we didn't put anything.
Right, and the way that we've been, so the way that we're doing the 700, reporting for the strategic plan, that we have been just using county funded projects through LCAB and Ag Advisory. When we're updating the total acreage of, the county conserved and updating that map, we have been including acres of, other protected lands that haven't been funded by the county, just because that would make it the whole picture.
Sure.
But yes, yeah, the 700 or the 730, that's just county funded easements.
Okay, so I just wanted to check for going forward. I understand in like that total percentage, but so like if say we go with what you're suggesting here, the 700 acres, when we're tracking that, that will be on projects that the county either helps with transaction costs or put some bond funds, has some skin in the game with helping get it. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, my initial reaction is to agree and to declare victory on the percentage goals and pick a numeric acreage goal.
The good thing about the acreage goal is that, to the discussion that was just had, our land trust partners are working outside of what they bring to the county for, and so that, this is more exactly what we're doing in-house. What we have, one of the encouragements we were given to start the strategic plan discussion was, what is it that we can have influence on and stay away from the stuff that we can't influence. So this is a way to look at that, truly, what are we doing? While at the same time, as we continue to update the maps, see collectively what's happening at the entire county level.
I'm supportive.
Yeah, I'm supportive too. I guess I'd like to see sort of an aspirational look beyond 2030. I don't know what it is. It's more county funding to try to secure more land, and that's challenging. The parcels are smaller, but.
And we are examining other avenues as we continue to look for conservation to get onto the landscape. Looking at things like buy, protect, sell, how can we lower the cost of entry into agriculture by working with organizations that can buy up tracts of land, get easements on them, sell them at the reduced value so that we can get more people into agriculture, as well as get more conservation as people enter into agriculture, they already have conservation on their landscape.
And two things I want to mention that made me think. So thanks to the work that me and Ariel did and like all of our conservation planning and the fact that we did these bonds, we were just able, Ariel can speak specifically to it, but there's an agricultural growth zone that they did for state funding And we were just awarded almost 2 million. It was the largest amount of any county in the state. And so that's directly because we have those matching funds in our bond. So with that money, we will get to use that with the bond funding, and they just presented to the Ag Advisory Board earlier this week. And we have a very good pipeline of some projects that they're working on. So to your point, right, the work that we do now and like the work that they've done continues to build a pipeline of where we can continue to get more good work done. So I agree with you 100%. I always want to keep looking at what we can do, but the work that they've done. And my hope is with this pilot project with that agricultural growth zone, because this is a new pilot project in the state, we're going to show how effective that is right here. So that our hope is that they will continue to do that as well. And then to your point about the BioProtect cell, I was talking to Commissioner Troxler when he was here for the state fair in Charlotte, and I can get that from him. There's someone in Charlotte that specifically.
We've been talking with him, yeah.
Because he was saying there's some good work being done there, and they're pulling in private funding as well, and they're doing that public-private partnership to do some.
And we've been talking to they're all working together, and they're also having work in minority populations where it was, I can't remember the number, over 40% of their BioProtect cell properties are going to BIPOC communities. Maybe it was higher than that. But yeah, there's like there's some really great work happening on many levels, and we've been plugging in with them for about a year now. After
It's called the Conservation Fund.
yeah.
And yeah, we've met with a few folks from that organizations and the point person in Charlotte, trying to entice them to, once they've, proven the concept in Charlotte, like have potentially a location here. So absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I know some folks that I think would have on the private funding side probably here.
Yeah, and it really, it seemed like the way to get them here is to show that we have reserved pots of funding to be able to use for the easement purchase side of it. And so we've been, thinking about the agricultural growth zone, thinking about potential RCPP with the USDA, and figuring out how to reserve that funding to entice them here, so.
So at this point, go ahead.
Just one comment, because I am supportive of switching to the number, but the reason I asked to look at the map, it's an impressive amount of work done in a year. But it was also, to me, the low-hanging fruit. It was the more remote areas of the county, where the development pressure is on and the higher risk of losing that land forever is on, it was still those target areas is on the areas closer in. I live in Leicester, so I can see right there, because I've been amazed with the course of a year how much has sprung up now that we've come back. And so it seems to be a risk assessment in terms of loss of the land, potential loss of the land forever needs to be made, and how this is done. I certainly understand going for the low-hanging fruit first. You want to lock up some of those big things while you can, but you might lose a lot of opportunities that, going back to the water quality charts, could help with some of those issues.
So the important thing to remember is that the program is completely voluntary. And so we work with landowners who are interested in putting a conservation and can afford to give up upwards of 50% of the value of their land in a conservation easement. And so historically, we've looked at, we used to bonus properties that were up against development pressure. And we have switched our thinking on that because we realized that we want, for our internal program, which is the Ag Advisory Board projects, which are held by easements by the Soil and Water Conservation District, they have to be working lands or forest lands, so farm or forest land. For those, up against development isn't necessarily the best high quality the projects that we can get.
Get more environmental benefit if
Exactly.
you're close to other protected lands. So that's kind of where that, that focus area kind of shifted. We wanted to make a bit more of an impact in the community by doing it in areas where there are already more lands protected.
I'm glad that you brought this up, Bob, because the thing that I was thinking, like, I like the proposal to switch to numeric, but given that you're in a strategic planning place, what I see you presenting to achieve these goals are programmatic strategies for conservation. And I wonder if you all need to also consider what a regulatory strategy would be so that there are methods that are not exclusively in incentive programs you're offering. And when I say regulatory, I'm not even sure exactly what I mean by that, but what I mean is you just did a comprehensive plan, you have these conservation focus areas, development pressure isn't gonna stop. So what's gonna happen when I pick a spot right in the middle of your blue, and right in the middle of your blue, so.
So I will say that we have that
Hold on,
in,
I'm almost there, sorry, it takes me a little while to get where I wanna go. But I think that right now is a really important time after you've passed your conservation, your comprehensive plan to really make sure that in your strategic plan, you're crosswalking what you're doing to update your development ordinances to achieve this goal. So that when you look at your strategic plan for this goal, you're not only seeing your voluntary incentive programs, you're seeing how it relates to your land use regulation as well. Okay, thanks, sorry.
and that's part of the strategic plan does have special call out for protection of rural landscape and actually won an award for our rural, our focus on our rural communities in the identity and how do we want to present Buncombe County. So that is part of, we're presenting what we can do and what we can bring from our, to your point, programmatic standpoint. But
Which all looks great.
Yeah,
Fully
and-
on
but-
board,
but-
but at the commissioner level, like, you don't wanna make sure that you're doubling down here while eroding your ability to achieve that there. So there needs to be some type of strategic crossing in the
I
goals.
can't agree more. I think we're moving way too slow in terms of updating our land use.
Yeah, hopefully that's a top priority in your
Yeah.
strategic plan.
So yeah, so in our growth and development focus areas where that's really focused on, so as part of the comprehensive plan, they developed the GEC map, but it's essentially mapping the entire county saying, where do we want to see growth and development, where do we want to see preservation? So one of the goals that's in the other focus area is, and they're working through the target right now, is to funnel the development into those targeted development areas.
Great.
And as the planning department works with the commissioners through the UDO for the next couple of years, text amendments to capture that regulatory
Awesome, that's,
Yeah, and we worked closely with the planning department to adjust the conservation focus areas to make sure that there was no overlap with that future land use plan.
great,
So
that's awesome.
hopefully
It seems like the offense, defense needs to happen to get to this goal, is kind of what I want to articulate, so great.
Will you go to the last slide? The goal slide. I think at this point we should entertain a motion from the group to recommend a goal to the broader commission for the purposes of the strategic plan.
Second.
was that
Does-
specific enough?
Does anyone making the motion want to say a number aloud for the purposes of the
I make a
minutes?
motion to adjust the goal to be 700 acres a year or 3,500 over 5 years.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Unless we.
Aye.
We can always do that before we get a 2% carbon reduction goal and double it in the city.
Cool. I like it when we
Don't
vote on
continue to
things.
be billing it, seriously. To see a government program be so effective is like rare and so joyful.
Yeah, Yeah.
Very proud of the work that we do, and to Terry's point, we were the #1 application in the state
That's incredible.
for,
That's great.
and the highest funded, so. We're being recognized, on a larger scale for the community. It's not, I mean, these two women are amazing, but it's also all of our partnerships, the land trust that we have here, the support we have at the commissioner level, the community support we have, voting for the bond. I mean, there's so many things going right in the community right now that help us do this work.
And all the landowners will.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
It's a lot better culture.
okay,
We're so great.
let's see if we can't spend some money and leverage some money on EV charging. As we can.
Yeah, so switching gears, this is just to provide some context to some conversations that have been had around community charging in terms of a strategic planning goal. So to start us off, just this is where we're at right now. So this map shows, this is the Alternative Fuels Data Center, which is kind of the best resource for community charging that I could find. So currently there's 72 different public charging locations across Buncombe County. There's 200 ports across those 72 locations. And then if we look at this graph on the right, it shows the orange bars are the number of registered EVs and plug-in hybrids in Buncombe County over the past 6 years. And then the green line shows the number of charging ports. So what we're seeing is the ratio of EVs to charging ports is increasing. But then this table at the bottom kind of shows it's like, we shouldn't be alarmed by that at the moment. So in 2019, there were like 10 EVs per charging port, and now we're closer to 20. But there's an NREL tool that predicts our charging need that's saying our ratio should be closer to 27-1. California and Norway, which are kind of like supposed to be leaders in this space, are 26-31-1 for their ratios.
Okay, this is awesome. This is kind of data I've been like thinking about. Doesn't exist for years now, so this is great.
And I think this is like, these ratios are really well illustrated by, this is occupancy at our networked public level 2 chargers. So College Jack and Sky offices. So you can see in 2022, it's like 15% was peak occupancy for our chargers. So those chargers were underutilized. And now it's closer to 45-50%. So huge bump, but still those aren't like at capacity all the time.
Just real quick, going back to that map for just a second.
Yeah.
The people with EVs in the room, I'm not one of them. How anecdotally, how public do all those dots feel to you? Like, does that feel like a network you have access to?
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, I've been driving an EV for almost 14 years, and obviously 14 years ago the landscape was very different.
Yeah.
And I've still in this 14 years never felt like I didn't have a place to go plug in my car. I mean, you get to this place when you've been driving one for a while. I know all the spots, right? Like the cars are smart enough actually nowadays, they tell you where to go. And whether or not there's like somebody already plugged in there or, so it's pretty convenient.
How many of those are DC fast chargers?
50.
50 total?
Yeah, mostly Tesla.
Okay.
So this is kind of a charging need prediction tool that was put out by NREL and DOE. Like lots of assumptions being made in this model. I'm not saying we should follow it to the T, but the key takeaway here is that this biggest piece of this pie, they're recommending that 93% of new charging infrastructure are home chargers. Most EV owners are charging at home. But that's not to say there's not like a smaller role for the county to play. So about 4.5% of new chargers should be public level 2. I highlighted a couple that might be good fit for the county to get involved. So rec centers includes parks, community centers includes libraries and offices. We employ people.
Sorry, I'm blind. Can someone zoom in a little bit on that?
Table.
The table.
If
Whichever ones.
you just
Okay.
How much of that conclusion might alter for us, given that we're a tourist destination? People don't come here, they don't have their home charger.
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to this a bigger question on who do we want to serve as the county too? Like, do we want to install a bunch of chargers for tourists? Is that our role? Or do we want to really serve more of our residents? But no, tourism isn't really factored into this model. But I should say that this model assumes that 12% of registered vehicles will be EVs by 2030, which puts us at around 30,000 EVs.
I'll add anecdotally that when we're doing development review, adding in
EVs is like a cherry on top we see very commonly when we're negotiating with developers, whether for residential or when they're going for a hotel. I would also say that like our land is a big part of your puzzle for a transportation network, so what is happening in city land, so it's a bit anecdotal, but I do see that like for larger scale projects and for hotels, like they're putting them into their clients.
It's becoming a default.
Yeah, especially when they're in a city like ours where we're looking at them and they're like, sure, because it's such a minimal investment to get the development process quicker. So now what we're doing at the airport, that's an interesting thing for their rental car situation. So I do think it is important to figure out how we're accommodating people in our community. But I think your fundamental is like, where's government money going? And I think for us, it's like, I wanna make sure developers are putting it in. And then what is the gap, I think is an interesting place for public service.
Perfectly teed up, this next slide. So this kind of shows private investment. And the graph on the left shows the International Council on Clean Transportation has done a nationwide assessment on predicted EV charging needs for 2030. And so the predicted need is the blue bar, and then the orange bar is they've gathered all these commitments from private industry on what kind of charging infrastructure they have already committed to install. So what the graph shows is that 220, what's that?
Sorry, what was the y-axis? What's the 25?
It's the number of chargers.
Okay, 2,500, is that? 2 million?
So the,
At a nationwide.
Oh.
yeah, nationwide.
Okay, never mind, sorry.
And that's non-home.
Yeah, these are not non-home chargers. And so what we're seeing is that 225% of the predicted need will be met by private investment for DC fast chargers, and it's about 84% for level 2. So these are just already committed deployments of EV charging infrastructure. And you can see, like, she mentioned like rental cars and hotels. So those are just some across the bottom. It also includes federal and state commitments, but there's no local government vehicles in that like orange bar.
So what this is telling us is trying to narrow in on where there might be a gap that local government could play.
Yeah, I mean, right, and basically saying like, yeah, at hotels, that's not our role. That work is happening.
So we'll get there.
Yeah.
So where do you think would be beneficial? Like, have y'all?
We're gonna get there.
Existing public facilities like community centers?
Yeah. So these are the considerations that we're thinking about when we're talking about county-owned EV charging infrastructure. So a big one is like, where do we have property and space for these? Are there amenities at those properties? Is there Wi-Fi? Is there like a park? Existing electrical infrastructure, which is very closely tied to the next one, which is like upfront costs and then also operating costs. Maintenance of these, if we have hundreds across the county, that's a full-time job, just maintaining them, administrating them. We do grant reporting on these, like there are tasks, staff time needed just to have more chargers. Equity is a big one, like where are we putting these, who are they serving, are we charging, is there a fee to use them? And then security and risk, particularly if we were to start accepting payment at any of these, or start collecting credit card information. So a few strategies for deploying that we're looking at. We'll dig into each one of these, but just want to put them all in one space for you. So level 2 community charging, level 2 workplace charging, supporting additional private investment, leasing DC fast chargers, and then ordinances and policy. So the first one has kind of been like our primary strategy so far. So this would be publicly accessible chargers at our public facing buildings, right? So parks, libraries, parking decks would be the primary locations for these. And then we could explore like some partnerships with other like local governments, kind of like the model of Black Mountain where they have a charger at the library.
Oh, because the city owns that property.
Yeah.
So that's their project.
It's their project, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but we work with them, kind of help facilitate them getting some VW money to put some chargers.
So currently we have nine ports at 3 locations that are publicly available. The county would own these. So far, the model is to not charge people a fee for use. The challenge here is that the cost to install these can really vary. So anywhere from $800 to our most basic one to $18,000 if it's networked and that we need to do trenching and install a new transformer. Current strategy is just to integrate these into construction and renovation projects. And so a good example of that is the South Asheville Library, which is getting a parking lot kind of upgrade. So as part of that, we'll be installing 4 EV chargers this year.
Are there any grant funds to go after, infrastructure funds or anything like
Yeah, so 2 of these 3 sites in red that we have were grant funded projects, both were Volkswagen mitigation funds.
And so we think that there should be some funding for future projects.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the grants that are currently open are multi-million-dollar high admin projects that aren't probably a good fit for us right now, but we're always looking.
There is also, again, tax credits available to us now that weren't previously. There's Duke's charger prep credit program where they can help with some of the infrastructure costs. So there's ways to, I think, make it a little more affordable than they have been in the past.
Let me ask the EV guy. If we're focusing on our residents and the majority of charging is done at home, how much do we really need a charger at a library?
It's it's just to fill a occasional gap, right? So if we put it at a park and someone was driving a carpool and they got to take somebody else's kid home from baseball practice that they weren't prepared for, they can plug in and get, another 20 miles.
Hey, this is Brownie. I'd like to have a few observations. So, I'm all for having the level 2 chargers at our public facilities. I think that's great, great service to offer. But I do kind of want to push back a little bit on the reality is certainly for people who have EVs, having a charger at your house, of course, is super attractive, and probably the majority of people will do that, right? And then you don't really need other charging in your community that often because you can just charge at home at night or when your car's parked there. But I think there's the big gap that seems to exist in my mind is all of the people who would be interested in purchasing an EV, but who, for various reasons, basically can't install an EV charger where they live. I mean, as a starting point, over a third of the community are renters, right? So a very high percentage of those residents in our community won't have that as an option. Maybe decades into the future, landlords will be retrofitting their properties, but for a long time to come, most people who are renters won't be able to realistically do that. And we're about to enter this era where there's about to be a lot of really affordable EVs. So in the past, the demographic around EV ownership has basically been very affluent people, but we desperately need for that to be much more mainstreamed and for everyone who'd be interested in it. In a community like ours, a very high percentage of our residents would like to purchase an EV because they know it's so much better for energy, for climate and the environment. So there's all the renters, but then there's also just I just went through the process of getting an EV charger installed at my house, and I'm excited to have it. But I was also impressed by what it was not the easiest thing in the world. And there's a lot of people just based on how your properties are laid out, where even a lot of homeowners, I think it'll be pretty problematic to get an EV charger installed at your house just based on your the way your lot and your house are laid out, I could do it, but just I can see how in a lot of houses, like it actually might be really challenging to do it, or also quite expensive. Like I had to run like a pretty long line to get to where to put the new 240 outlet on my back porch. Maybe it's a couple $1,000s. I could do it, but it's a pretty big, there's a bigger barrier to entry on having home EV charging installed than I think might be intuitive to a lot of people. So for all those different reasons, like if we really like believe in the idea that we want EVs to be accessible to all the people in our community who want to drive EVs, then I think we need to make sure that there's sufficient public fast charging in the community. And since I haven't had an EV charger at my house the last year, I have been like reliant on using public facilities. And, you need to be able to go charge your car up to do stuff. You can't just like wait for, 6 hours for your car to charge at a level 2 station, unless it happens to be where, you work or something like that. You basically need to be able to go charge your car just like you'd be going to get gas in a regular conventional car, which means DC fast charging. I don't have a Tesla. I think if you have a Tesla, you're in pretty good shape. But for all the non-Tesla owners, like there's a huge line at the public fast charging facilities we have in Buncombe County now. Like person like myself will it's frustrating, but I'll sit through it and do it because I'm like a true believer on this. But like most people would not tolerate the kind of like wait times and things like that to access public charging. They would not purchase an EV. And so if they know that that's what they're looking at. So I know there'll be more public fast charging coming online in the future, but it's definitely a gap now. And if the other kind of like private sector stuff that's going to happen to bring more DC fast charging online isn't meeting the needs, I think to me that's an important thing to keep an eye on and maybe have a plan to address. The one other thing I'll just add to this too is that the other issue with public fast charging is that it's really expensive, right? Like most of the places are like 40 to 55 cents a kilowatt hour. One of the most attractive things about EVs is that there's the energy costs are so much cheaper if you have an EV charger at your house. But if you're paying, 4 or 5 times as much for the electricity as you would at your house, that's another big deterrent. So like, I guess I would just say like in the long term, it would be really cool if we had a goal of creating, accessible public fast charging and where the price for that electricity you're buying is no more than it would be if you were purchasing your electricity as a normal retail buyer. And I think there's a big equity piece to that too, because like if all the renters in our community who are ever going to have EVs are paying, 4 to 5 times as much for that electricity as those of us who are homeowners who use EVs, not that all renters, are low income, but like certainly a higher percentage of them are. So I do think there's an equity piece there too. So anyway, those are a few of my thoughts on this topic.
Those are very good thoughts, Brownie. We really appreciate them. And we do have a slide that addresses DC fast charging.
All right, brilliant.
And some of the both, sort of pros and cons on that as well. So I'm gonna let Jackie keep going.
Okay, and just one other note on this slide. So this this map of like some potential future locations is laid over the Justice 40 census tract map. So again, as we frame this and as an equity thing, there's fewer opportunities to build some of these in those tracts.
I'm sorry, what tracks?
Justice 40, it's like a federal program that just kind of identifies disadvantaged communities based on a variety of factors.
Oh, and that's the dark gray.
Correct.
Yeah. So strategy number 2 would be to install EV chargers that were more targeted towards county employees. So it would be a workplace charging program. One reason why is because this is anticipated to be a high need for level 2 chargers. If people aren't charging at home, then they're charging at work. It's the second most common place. So this would be at our non-public facing facilities. A good example of that is an EMS facility, right? Where we're not inviting people to come charge their vehicles there, but we have staff that spend the night and sort of have long shifts there. We currently have this at 9 locations across the county. Again, that cost to install varies. We would probably own these. A couple upcoming projects are the new EMS station and the fleet facility. Strategy number 3, kind of to Brownie's point earlier, is to support private investment. One good example of this is the Electrify Asheville Buncombe campaign that we have that's really would support residents who want to install a charger at their home. And so there are some federal utility state rebate programs. Our goal would be to connect our county residents to those programs. The Electrify platform also identifies some like vetted technologies, vetted contractors, and then there's also a financing option too. So bringing together all those things in a single platform and then pairing it with like some potential one-to-one, like what we're calling navigation services, which is just customer support, basically. To eliminate some of those barriers.
I have two thoughts. The what do they even call it? The means tested state level rebate programs, point of sale rebates that are astonishingly still not available.
Supposed to be after the first of this year.
Okay, is there charger money in there? There's not.
Panel upgrades.
Panel upgrades, okay, just that. That's important.
Yeah.
It can be,
Yeah,
yeah,
it can be.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And then the other thought is, what about us just kind of thinking about like an EVgo partner or some, one of the private charging companies? Oh, okay.
So strategy number 4 is to explore some like DC fast charging leasing options. And so the first conversation we had was with Duke, who has a leasing program. We kind of sent them these 6 locations on the left just to put some feelers out on like what kind of electrical infrastructure is available there. Every single one of those locations would basically require a new transformer. So we're looking at just an install cost of anywhere between $30,000 to $100,000 at a single location. And that is on top of an $1,800 a month lease, which has a minimum 7-year term. So overall, these projects would probably be around $200,000 over 7 years. And then so Duke would own these, and they would take on a lot of that, like we would like outsource the liability essentially of preparing these and collecting payment at the chargers themselves.
And the developer or project manager or something like this is Duke or us? Duke, okay.
Duke installs the charger, the physical charger itself, but you as a customer, the county is responsible for getting power to that charger, so you're responsible for the whole nitty-gritty piece of the infrastructure. And then the incentive program for the charger prep credit could offset a little bit of that cost, but probably not a whole lot. If you do the math on how much money you're spending overall in leasing a charger from Duke over the 7 years, you could buy 2 of the chargers. With that amount, theoretically, they're covering the maintenance of that unit, which is great, but Duke essentially designed this program like their outdoor lighting program, but the big difference is with outdoor lighting, you say, hey, come install these poles, they do that, they have you under contract, and they're getting money, you're getting immediate benefit, right? But this thing, you're installing huge upfront cost to install the units themselves. And at the end of the term, the equipment is likely antiquated, maybe not in 7 years. I don't know how much chargers will change in that time. But I don't know if it makes sense to me personally. If I were a customer, I don't know if I would do a DC fast charger from Duke's program like this.
Yeah, I think the
I'm saying that as
primary
a Duke Energy employee.
I think the primary benefit is like outsourcing that payment collection piece and also the maintenance piece, because general services isn't staffed to kind of manage this like really intense electrical.
So my question is, so Brownie's concerned about folks who are renting, right? And I think in previous conversations, he mentioned, you know, this, like, at apartments in various places like this. And I'm wondering with our running clearly, we're both on our affordable housing. So when we're doing those projects and we're providing funding, are there any conversations with them about potentially having any EV as some of those projects that we are already been funding into, where, you know, those, it'd be a level 2, I'm guessing, we wouldn't be getting into this DC charging. And then that would be specifically some of the target demographics he's talking about being able to help.
Yeah, I guess we've had Jeremiah at one of our meetings. We've not really had those conversations direct with developers yet, to my knowledge. We probably should have Jeremiah again once the.
It is on our
previous
radar,
kick out.
100%, it is on our radar. And in fact, we've got another slide. Yeah.
And I think Duke has a multifamily housing EV charger thing, or was that in a bill?
They will incentivize chargers through the charge pro credit.
Yeah.
In that kind of scenarios, and it's certainly so much cheaper for them to plan that stuff into the project rather than to retroactively go back and try to install chargers after the fact and look at quotes. Your number for installing level 2 chargers at like 800 to how much? 1,800?
18,000.
18,000 projects where it's like 2 of the exact same chargers and one quotes $25,000 and the other quotes $80,000 for the exact same commitments at 2 different locations. So it's like, it's incredibly variable.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, planning up front is what's critical, and that's, I think, where ordinance and policy, I think, could make a real difference. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
Yes,
to
Jack.
Maggie's point earlier of like, you know, having kind of this like regulatory and programmatic joint approach. So planning couldn't be here today to talk about this, but this would be really their initiative. But this would, a type of ordinance that we would have in mind would be requiring EVs installed or EV ready parking spaces at new multifamily or commercial developments. And so it's hard to see, but this is a sample ordinance from Charlotte, so.
And we can do that.
So Charlotte has done it. It's in their UDO.
This used to us not being able to require stuff, so this is
We have-
a little bit of a shock.
Yeah, I don't blame you for feeling that way. I will say that it's clear to us that Raleigh does kind of have their eye on this to a certain degree,
To
because
take it away.
Yeah. So SB 166, which just passed, we're still kind of interpreting it. It's not really well written and it's a little unclear. So we're trying to figure out exactly what the breadth of that sort of legislation does. But it does essentially take away the ability to do this to a certain degree. So it's clear, at least even if this legislation doesn't, that Raleigh is thinking about this stuff.
It passed the Senate, but not the House.
No, it's done, yeah, it was signed into law, because they
overrode the detail.
Yeah, they vetoed it and then they overrode veto, so it's done.
So they have taken away the ability to do it.
It's unclear.
Just so-
Because the law wasn't written well.
Yes, I've asked multiple people and I've gotten multiple interpretations, so.
The intention was to strip the power, the legal impact of that is questionable.
Correct at this point, and yeah, and it's an EV, yes, that's right, it's an EV ready. Yeah, and thank you. It is focused on residential.
Okay.
Again, there is some question as to how strong those teeth are, but we're kicking it to the school government
Or
also to try and get them to sort of interpret it for us, but.
Or they'll just go back and fix it. So
It's kind of to my
a
point, is
matter
that
of
like
time.
clearly Raleigh has an eye on this. Charlotte did pass this, so up until this point, it is currently legal. And again, Nate's on vacation, I wanted him to be here to be able to kind of dig into this a little bit, but he did say he'd be more than happy to come back and talk to you a little bit about it. But you know, again, just on its face value, this type of lever would be a great one to be able to pull. It's just not clear whether or not we're gonna have that authority in the future.
Has our legal team looked?
I sent it to them, they have not gotten
Okay.
a response yet, but that's very, again, this just happened. So it's very recent.
Well, if you can't, I mean, given the strategy area of ordinance and policy, if you can't do regulatory, you could figure out where you have incentives.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
the way that we always do it, right? It's like we have a hotel overlay, we're looking at a multifamily overlay where you could skip going to city council if you check off certain boxes.
That's right.
And so I'd like to see our community at the city level go into a place where we're putting incentives in for green stuff. We have some now, but they're questionably not actually incentivizing. But so even if you couldn't do a regulatory, I think adding to this slide deck that there could be incentive placed within your development review would be still really fruitful.
We'd see something like that occur in the text amendment process, like, for good design, affordable housing, multifamily, which is all on the slate for.
I mean, I can count, since I've been elected, I can count on one hand how many times legal has told me I have power to pass policy at all, so. I'd be interested in their answer quickly. Cool.
And then again, just to kind of recap, we already do have like a lot of EV goals. It's in our sustainable fleet policy, which requires that we build, put EV charging infrastructure into facilities. It's mentioned in the comp plan. We have a fleet specific goal in the strategic plan. It's in our sustainability office business plan. Again, it's more fleet specific than community. And then there's several projects that are upcoming where we charge it, or that are already like funded to install EV chargers. And that's the new fleet facility, the EMS station, the college deck, and the South Asheville Library. So the work is happening. And then
One thing I just add,
Yeah.
Jackie kind of set the stage with a bunch of data to ground the conversation. Now we're at the recommendations. But as Jackie was walking through, part of it was how do folks use EVs? It was a big part of her message, at home, at work. But there's also like that next level of like out and about kind of thing. So I think she didn't say that explicitly, but as we think about how people actually use their EVs, how they charge, what their habits are, I think that's what Jackie's trying to present to us, some options that fit that.
What about, I was thinking about Terry's question earlier, we have existing multifamily residential that exists that includes subsidized units in it, like MHO properties is what I'm thinking of. All of them, I assume, don't have EV chargers. And so like thinking ahead towards the equity piece of this, what do you think, what do you kind of think about in the back of your head in terms of maybe solutions to that? Is there a solution where we kind of help subsidize the construction of that? Like, is that even practically possible? Assuming it was financially attractive.
I think there's probably a number of levers to pull when it comes to projects that we are directly involved in. Whether that's our affordable housing, Ferry Road property, there's a lot coming down the pipeline in the next few years that, again, I don't want to speak to specifics. I'd like Nate and his folks to be here. But I think there are a lot of opportunities, again, where we're directly involved, where we can easily incentivize or work with the developer to ensure that those types of things happen. I mean, we're having these discussions as we speak when it comes to like Ferry Road. We've got those proposals, intent to look at them and talk about them and go through that negotiation process in the not too distant future. So I think that's right, Parker. I think there's levels to be pulled there. I don't want to speak specifically to what they are today, because again, I think there's more people that need to be involved.
You've seen the pro formas. I mean, these affordable housing projects, razor thin margins.
Yeah.
So if you add requirements, I'm not saying you shouldn't, that you're impacted and likely to pay for it. One way or another.
Yeah.
That said, as we think about like what we're trying to create, sustainable, equitable development, like should that be the lever you pull to like make development reflect our values? Like,
And that's the reason why I personally haven't brought it up, and I imagine others haven't brought it up in that context. But I also know like people today don't believe, as Brownie said, that these kind of things are for low-income folks in 2028, or we should be feeling the same way about it.
world's changing now.
Yeah.
Well, I think And my question wasn't asking, saying, should we require them to do it on these projects? I'm saying, to Brownie's point, was saying, you know, this is where he sees there being a need. I was like, oh, if we were deciding that we're gonna put some funding into it, we potentially we look at some of those projects and being able to pull in other funding to help do it. That was my question. I was not saying that we should be requiring that, just to be clear. So that would only make that more expensive.
We have the responsibility as a county to support EV infrastructure being installed, especially in low-income communities and certain for county residents. I don't know if, I do agree that we need more DC fast charging to kind of level the playing field and make it feel like this is a technology people can access and use, but I don't know if the county needs to be on the hook for subsidizing the speed at which people charge. You know, it is great, super convenient, and it'd be great if they weren't so expensive, but it's a lot of money for us to invest for something that's just more convenient, you know, rather than access necessarily.
And we know the private sector is investing in
Exactly.
that because their whole business model is
Support
like,
private
come, go
sector.
to Whole Foods, so like,
Yes.
it is deeply tied to several private sector's priorities, so great, let them play that role.
What's the finger to the wind cost of 2 level 2 chargers installed in an existing parking lot? I'm thinking of an apartment, but just maybe anywhere. Depends on the utility costs entirely.
No, existing infrastructure, but I'd say like 20 grand is a ballpark.
Yeah, is there already capacity there, right? Is there gonna be trenching needed to, you know, where are you gonna put them? I mean, there's a lot of factors. It could be a lot less than 20 grand. If it's already sort of built and convenient to it, it could end up being more.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably, if we're throwing out ballpark numbers, I think that's fair.
Okay. Brownie, I don't know if you can see decision point 1 on the screen. I think the answer to that is yes, but you brought it up during the context of the strategic plan. Do you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
establishing?
you know, again, I think if you just kind of like look at this through the lens of someone who's like, yeah, I'm interested in buying an EV, but like, I know I can't have an EV charger at my house. So like, let's just like put ourselves in those shoes, right? So just having like and again, level 2 chargers are great as long as they're not, you know, I think spending $18,000 on a level 2 charger would be pretty questionable. But if you can install them cheaply, because the chargers themselves are quite cheap, it's just, you know, what kind of electrical work needs to be done. But just having them at the grocery stores and places, in the libraries and stuff, like, you know, it takes like maybe 4 or 5 hours to charge up your car. Like when you go shopping, that only takes 20 or 30 minutes. So it's like we need to make charging really convenient and accessible for everyone who wants to have an EV. And so, I mean, the solution to that to me seems like we just need a relatively small number of fast charging infrastructure you know, and again, maybe the private sector is going to provide enough of that. They definitely have not done that in our community yet, right? Um, and maybe they'll catch up with a lot more EVs coming into the marketplace. Like, you know, I'm not sure when they're going to really catch up so that when you go there, you can predictably have a spot and not be sitting there waiting for, you know, an hour to charge your car, right? Like just unless you're very committed to this, like most normal people wouldn't do that. And when it gets the reputation that that's what it looks like, then people are like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I mean, from what I've read, like the public perception that a lack of accessible EV charging infrastructure is the number one reason people choose not to procure EVs who are otherwise interested in it. So if we can positively change that perception in reality, I think that's a big difference. And again, the one other question I would come back to is like, I know there'll be a lot more DC fast charging built out there in the world in the years to come. Are we aware of anyone who's going to make it like competitively priced with what all of the rest of us pay for electricity in all other aspects of our lives? And if there is someone else who's going to do that, then great. And I'm probably, you know, feel like that needs to be addressed. But if the answer is like no one's planning to do that, then I do feel like maybe that a role the county could provide. Like if we could help provide and affordable, accessible DC fast charging for Buncombe County residents, I mean, it might meaningfully change the percentage of our community members who choose to purchase an EV, which is one of the very most powerful things they can do to like lower their climate footprint. So I don't know. For all those reasons, I continue to think that's compelling. The Duke Energy like leasing model, I mean, I kind of like the idea of that a lot, except for that specific program, you know, typical a lot of stuff Duke does, like doesn't sound that great. But the fundamental idea of entering into a partnership like that sounds good. Just the details of their specific program sound like financially not very well thought out. So those are my comments.
I want to say something to what Brownie said about public perception, because I've certainly heard that with public perception, but the reality is we have an EV, we just plug it into the regular outlet. Like, we didn't have to put in anything extra at our home. And so I think that is where the public perception is sometimes incorrect, that you've got to spend all this extra money at your home. We just plug it in, it charges up overnight just fine, and we can drive all around town. I can drive for 2 days before I even have to plug it up. And I live in Sandy Marsh. So this is not as complicated, but I really don't see that the DC fast charging is the answer to that at this time, because I do feel, to what was already said, that there's other options with that. I think the public perception is that people don't understand that they can just plug it in at their house and they'll be charged to be able to drive around town.
In that case, the component missing from all of this is simply public education. That's cheap.
Well, again, like if you're a renter, that's probably not going to be just an option for a lot of people. And for people who drive more, I mean, I know you live in Sandy Much and come to town sometimes, but like I've been doing that last year. I've relied on DC fast charging quite a bit, and I think a lot of people will.
Sounds like that maybe it's not an either or, that it's a both and it's a matter of which strategy do that a lot more, which do that a lot less. And so, you know, we wanna, I don't know, as I listen, I'm like, great argument.
Yeah,
It's like they
I
both
know.
like, okay. And I think that, like, is it an either or is this a both and then dial as it goes?
It's definitely a perception and an infrastructure problem. People don't want to buy EVs because they don't see the chargers and they don't realize that 93% of the charging is going to occur in home.
Yeah.
And then there's the Brownie's talking about the can't.
Yeah, I guess the either or is like fast charging, non-fast charging is what I'm kind of saying. It's like, I feel like some of the conversation I'm feeling internal is circling across, and I'm going, well, then maybe it's not that we have to pick one or the other, it's that we do both.
Brownie's totally right, like the cost of DC fast charging is expensive because the people who have bitten the bullet and installed it are trying to recoup their costs. And if the county saying, hey, we want to make this accessible to people and we're not going to try to make a profit, we can sell the electricity at a reasonable rate, that's great, but
But missing from this conversation for me is cost benefit. We talked about the individual costs of things. But I mean, I'm like you, I've bounced all around from, you know, with Brownie, we need to put them in, you know, work on making the community more enabled, especially those who cannot do it themselves. Versus maybe the best way to help them is to, you know, allow them to fully charge at the grocery store. But you know, we don't know what's the cumulative cost of community enablement that is helping people get installed, especially those who don't own their own homes, chargers where they can afford them, versus the cumulative cost of installing fewer but centrally located fast chargers where they can fully charge while they grocery shop or whatever. To me, that's the question. I think there is a bit of yes, it's all good answer, and that probably is not exclusively one, but in terms of where our thrust should be, that's what's missing.
So from the staff standpoint, when you look at all of these different options, and we had to prioritize of what's going to have the most impact with the current situation that you laid out.
Yeah.
What do you all see as being kind of having the most impact in a responsible, sustainable way for us?
Yeah. You want to take that or you want me to take that?
I was gonna let you take it.
So, it depends on your priorities. If we're talking equity, and accessibility, then our policy / incentive option, I think, is really important, really do. Again, we're gonna have some real opportunities because of the affordable housing bond, because of the Ferry Road project. There's real opportunity to put these in places where the folks that we are trying to encourage to go down this road will have access. I think something that hasn't been talked about is that the marketplace also is not only providing DC fast charging, but that like there have been some recent changes that have opened up previously unavailable fast charging to multiple manufacturers. So for example, just in the last 7 or 8 months, Tesla has now sort of opened up that we've got 25 more available DC fast chargers than we did 6 months ago, that are available at the Whole Foods and at the park and that where we used to have essentially like a half a dozen locally period, and now we've got 30, right? So there have been some changes in the marketplace because of things like that have made fast chargers significantly more available. They are expensive, you're right. Typically still, maybe I've been doing this for a long time, I still pay less than I would pay for a tank of gas, so I think that the policy and incentive pathways is a really positive way to go. And I think that because we do have public land available, like in some places, we need to continue to try and focus, do that where we can, and look at partnerships with the city of Asheville and Black Mountain and some of our other municipal partners to see if we can't co-locate in some opportunities as well. But my experience with fast charging is that it's more often used by folks in and out of town and coming through versus the folks that live here. It's true that that is the case in some instances for sure. That one particular fast charger, I'm pretty sure I know where Brownie's talking about over at Sam's Club, is utilized consistently for sure. But again, we're starting to even see that start to dissipate some with the opening of Tesla's network.
So Jeremiah and Brownie, what if either instead of or in addition to the libraries, we take a side aspirational goal to maybe look at partnering with the EVgo's of the world, where they kind of put in the investment to enable more fast chargers in the county. But the idea I have in my head is what if we established a rebate program that was means tested, that we copied from whatever the state's about to spit out for their point of sale rebate programs, a rebate program that's targeted towards, that's again means tested towards multifamily residential and single family residential and renters and lower income people.
So like an incentive program.
An incentive program where we write you a check for your infrastructure.
I mean, it's something we can kick the tires on for sure. I mean, it's going to be the first time we've incentivized in some way or another. But that's kind of the same road I'm talking about going down with the whole policy and incentive side of it.
Yeah.
Is working with, our planning team, working with Tim in economic development, and figuring out what are the best ways to pull some of those levers, and if offering some kind of a rebate if you choose to do, have this many parking spaces so that you're going to install this many EV chargers and give you some carrot in order to make that happen. I think that's a perfectly reasonable and acceptable way to move forward.
I know it's legal because Raleigh just kicked out their e-bike rebate program, which I know Asheville's looking at very closely to do, and he did it now.
What comes to mind for me too is going back to the slide that you have, and I'm also kind of looking at timing since we have 12 minutes left, of like the discussion slide that you just had of like, do we need a specific strategic plan goal? I'd say yes, and like several of the other goals, we've gone into iterative discussion on, is it this tool, is it that tool, is it regulatory? Like, I think this opens up hopefully a lot of conversation. So I don't know that we need to decide fully what the what is today, but I think that there's some directional points. But I would say your organization does a really good job of goal setting and following accountability. What does that mean? And measure what matters. And I would think that there's enough value in this being in your strategic plan of your energy and environment stuff. And then just like we've done with other goal areas use the next quarter to flush out what it is or what have you, and allow y'all to go do some research and come back. So I would say for decision point one, yes, personally. Should it speak to generally or just Buncombe County? I feel like the tenor of this discussion is that it should be about serving the community. So I would say it's not just about public employees and how much effort you put into serving community versus public employees could be fleshed out. So if the goal is a little bit broad, but that's my reaction to the discussion points you served up.
So I guess I would ask that, because where we sort of keep hitting a wall in terms of trying to come up with a goal is the specifics around the way that the strategic plan wants the goals to look to a certain degree. Because they want real specific numbers by real specific times. And that can be a bit of a challenge when trying to forecast what the world's gonna look like over the next 5 years, right? And how we say this many number of chargers by this date is a challenge, and that's why we keep sort of like coming to a place and then stopping and saying, ugh. You know, where do we go from there?
I mean, I do strategic planning professionally, like, would it be okay if 90% of your strategic plan goals were smart metrics and a couple of them were a little more blurry because.
Well, you're seeing my turn.
Yeah,
You're seeing
so
my
that's
turn
up to y'all, but it sounds like, I don't know that I would have enough information to make a motion with
Right.
specific metrics and numbers. I would be a lot more financial, and like, we're just starting this big conversation, and so maybe the goal is about like, create a detailed policy plan with metrics, and you could achieve that, but it doesn't, I don't know. So that would be an instinct, is, it sounds like we're in a planning phase more than an execution phase, but maybe I've been missing out on other combos and y'all feel further along.
Another thought, you know, the how is kind of the question that we debated today, like the tool that we're using, technology. I wonder if there's a goal that is still measurable, a little more generic, and maybe it relates to like our community facing facilities. So X percentage of parks and libraries have like an EV infrastructure, community available EV infrastructure. And then we can figure out like the exact, like DC, level 2, like that type of thing, as we go. And that can be more of a,
I think
There's
that
another
is-
way to deal with the metric issue, because I also have a strategic planning background at dealing with some of these real challenging ones, is to phrase it a sense of ensuring that Buncombe County, well, building up the Buncombe County, what I'm really getting at is to leverage the national goal. In other words, that's out there, and we need to provide the support for that. That's what we're trying to do, so make that the target. You know, as a strategic planner, I would have come back and said, yeah, but what's within your control?
Yeah.
You know, but if that's the best we can do, that at least is a number that we can hang our hats on. And what we are trying to do is support us getting there.
You mean Biden's national goal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think to Tim's point, that is something we can, I think, very reasonably do. We know what we own, we know where it is, we have a pretty good idea of the infrastructure needed to install in public places that are ours. And if we needed to, I think, again, it's not like we have 100 of these, but we could, I think, reasonably double the number of public chargers we have available to meet that goal, to like set a goal of doubling the number of publicly available chargers we have. Now, that would still only go like 20-ish out there. But I think that's a reasonable thing for us to do based on the fact that like we only own so much land and there's only so many places to put these things. So, you know, if it's needing to be a goal like that, we can set that as a goal and we feel comfortable with it. It's, I think when we start, again, deciding whether or not it's fast charging or whether or not it's level 2, I think we can continue to have those discussions.
yeah, we can use the goal to set direction, and then just as we do with everything else in the budget cycle, we figure out, you know, these are our trade-offs, right? Like we can have a 20-minute charger for X cost, or we can have, you know, a 4 or 6 hour charger for this cost. And y'all get to choose just like you do in the CIP, you know.
It's really cut and dry, but to Maggie's point, how do we put some language in the strategic plan that make sure we're looking at things outside of the community program, like a county project or properties, right?
a separate one altogether.
Bob, or anybody, does anybody know Biden's goal, the detail, the fine print off the top of your head?
It's something by 2030.
2030.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Google is your friend.
It's like
Something like
50% of
2030.
sales or something, right? It's not adoption, it's like.
And I wonder if the direction to y'all is like, yes, we want something in the strategic plan. We want something that that guides internal. And Jeremiah, you kind of spit out some numbers now of what that is, and then we can say that, and then the other one is like, within a year, establish a community goal or something of that nature. And so it is something you achieve, and it is something that is performed, but it's a process goal because you need more time. But
Your
to make sure
question-
there's two specific things within the strategic plan, community and internal, sounds like this. I also feel like we're rushing, but I don't know, maybe it's just because it's so exciting.
Well, because they want to have a
Because they want to have a strategic plan.
October 15th, is like when they want to have this locked in.
To your
What do you
question
think,
on the
Brad?
language, the
Yeah.
federal government has set a goal to
The-
make half of all new vehicles sold in the US in 2030 zero emissions vehicles, and to build a convenient and equitable network of 500,000 chargers to help make EVs accessible to all Americans for both local and long distance trips.
It could be like,
Thanks, Bob. Ronnie, what were you gonna say something?
I'm just, there's just 5 minutes left in the meeting, is just an observation. Yeah, and I think this is our last meeting before we're going to vote on our strategic goal. So I think it's been a good discussion, but we might just be, out of time on this. So
Okay.
Alright.
Does anybody want to make any motion at all, or alternatively repeat Tim's suggestion back as a motion to the group, or none at all? That's
And
where we're
so
at.
Tim's suggestion or Jeremiah's was basically that we look at a certain number on public land, on county owned land. Yes. I'm supportive of y'all looking at that and assessing it as long as it's in. We're not doing it just to do it, right? The number that you come up with, you see that that's gonna directly impact the community in the way that we want to go.
And they'll have to trust a little bit too that the team is gonna continue to explore other options. We've talked extensively about affordable housing projects and how those can be partnered with, and so I think that's reflected, and Jackie had it in her business plan that she's working with Jeremiah.
So some language in the motion to support incentivizing, to explore incentivizing, I guess.
I don't think we have to put that in this motion.
I was suggesting stick to something pretty tight, measurable,
Right.
and then trust that we'll continue to work.
Yes. So I will make a motion for staff to come up with a measurable goal around installing EVs on county property.
Okay, within the context of the strategic plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, for specifically, some specific goals around the strategic plan.
Is there a second?
second,
Motion and a second. All those in favor of the recommendation Terry's laid out and sending that on to the full board? Say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Let's just ask that too. Cool. Great. I think Jeremiah's gonna try to save the world in 3 minutes. Letter C.
and I will have to run right over top of the hour.
All right.
Sorry, Casey.
I also have a hard stop at 12.
No, I'm really sorry.
so are we gonna be able to do it?
I mean,
Can we wait?
I can just talk us through this real fast.
Okay.
If that's, and then we can pick it up next time. So there was discussion around the 100% renewable, basically. And whether or not, like, is this achievable? Can we do it? Like, how do we get there? Short version is this. With where we're at right now, I'd say we're probably in the neighborhood of 40% of the way there, right? 40 out of 100%. If things move forward as they're planned right now, and Duke meets their commitments and we're able to reduce our emissions from our fleet, et cetera, like we're probably closer to 60% of the goal, right? Still leaves a gap, right? There's 3 ways to get there, essentially, if there's a gap.
And this is specifically Buncombe County,
Correct,
our.
correct. This is the 2030 goal, not the 100% by 2042.
Okay, just,
That would be number 1, to find another utility scale program, right? Another Woodfin landfill solar project.
Mm-hmm.
That's priority number 1, because that's frankly the best way to get there. It's challenging for a number of reasons. Siting utility scale solar anywhere near Buncombe County is a challenge. But that's number 1. Number 2
how
would
many
be,
acres do you need for utility scale solar?
in this case, we need about a 10 megawatt facility. So I mean, it would be a lot, 50 acres. 60 acres, you know. Depends on the acreage to a certain degree, right? How flat is it, and you know, the topography to some degree. The other option would be a utility program like Green Source Advantage. So Green Source Advantage is one that has been around for a few years. It's got challenges too. It's very complicated and it's very expensive. The other option would be procurement of RECs directly, like go to the market, buy RECs. Those are the 3 options. Again, I'm speeding this up in the 90-second version of it. But it's find a utility scale project, work with Duke on Resource Advantage, or go out and buy the RECs, right? And there are different ways to do that. So that's really all this presentation said. It got into the details of each of those options and what they look like. It is possible to get to this goal. It is not possible to get to this goal without some kind of REC transaction in some way, right? Call it what you want. Again, we can get there through the utility scale project, challenging there. I would say there's one that we thought was totally dead, that the defibrillator came out, we have a little bit of a heartbeat on again, so that's kind of exciting. But I'm not gonna talk about it too much longer because we have a long way to go. So there could be another utility scale project in the pipeline, potentially. And then it's either work with Duke to procure RECs or go out to the market and get RECs. Those are really our 3 options. That's the 90-second version of that presentation.
Okay.
I see no need to take our foot off the gas.
And
Yeah, and this is all, again, going back to, do we keep this goal and do we keep it as it is? You know, that's where why we're talking about it.
And if someone disagree with me or tell me I'm wrong, I see no reason to talk about this in the context of the strategic plan. So it's my suggestion we put this on the front of the next agenda. Or it doesn't have to be the front, but somewhere on the next agenda to discuss further.
I'm happy to discuss in more detail. However, does that mean we don't leave this in the strategic plan? I mean, it is already an established resolution.
Is it in the strategic?
Well, that's the question. Should it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we should put it in the new strategic plan, definitely.
Yeah, that's where we're seeking clarity right now. It's like, okay, do we keep it the same?
Yeah,
And
I'll
do we
make a
put it-
I'll make a motion that we affirm the county's 100% renewable goal for our local government in the strategic plan.
Second.
Motion and a second on the table. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. And then we can come back and, talk about how we're gonna do it in some more
Yes,
detail.
that's right.
But,
That's right.
yeah.
I'd be happy to bring this
So-
back and we'll do this next time.
Because I think it's
All right.
possible, I think we could,
Yeah.
I think we could vote on
Yeah,
like
thanks, guys. Take it easy.
the last 3 options to help the full board maybe achieve the thing and maybe and kind of put it to bed,
That's right. That's right.
What are the 4 ways in order of priorities to solve it?
I think that's kind of what the guidance we're hoping to look for.
Okay.
Is like, we've got some guidance in terms of like what like we've done community surveys on this, and we know kind of how the public generally feels about some of these options. Like even just rec procurement can be very different, right? Like you can work with like NC Green Power to buy recs that are somewhere fairly close by. Or you can go to a national market and buy recs pretty cheap from some wind farm in Oklahoma. The community's not as like jazzed about that idea, as I can imagine.
Yes,
The point is that there are options.
there are options and there's pros and cons, and so we should air them out, So it's like
Did you?
I think like a wind farm in Norfolk is more attractive, attractive.
Partners.